Tampa going out and selling half of their franchise to get Brandon Hagel from Chicago, I thought that was the most shocking. I don't necessarily think it was the poorest value. I was shocked that he garnered that much return.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just quickly go over the trade. So it was Hagel to Tampa, essentially for a first in 2023, a first in 2024,
Wow.
Taylor Radish, and Katchuk. I don't know how to say his name, so I apologize. But also, the Blackhawks sent 2/4 back to Tampa, but really, it was 2 firsts for Brandon Hagel plus.
Yeah, I saw a really funny tweet that earlier on when JT Miller's name was in the trade block, everyone on Twitter was clowning Vancouver for wanting to get 2 first-round picks for JT Miller. And then a guy who I admittedly had never heard of before gets traded for 2 first-round picks. I mean, I might be exposing myself as a casual here, but I'm sorry, I didn't really know who Brandon Hagel was before
I
this
don't
deal.
think many people really knew who he was.
Once again, this guy is incredibly underrated with a projected WAR in the 86th percentile. He is on term for 3 years at a $1.5 million cap hit, which was probably the most enticing thing for this type of player.
It was.
But do you not think that they could have gotten him for slightly less than 2 first-round picks over the next 2 years?
I'm sure they tried. I heard that the price was going to be 2 firsts when his name was in rumors, and I was like, "You're crazy if they get that." But they got it, so there must have been some competition for him, or the Blackhawks were saying, "Well, we're happy to keep him because he's good and on term. So you either got to meet our price, or we'll just keep him." And I guess Tampa kind of weighed their options and figured, you know what, we'll swing for the fences one more time. But I think the fact that you said he's under control for not only this one but 2 more years after this is really what they were going after. And for reference, Leafs fans hate this trade. The Leafs gave up 2 firsts for a young Phil Kessel. I mean, I like Phil Kessel was great here, and everyone thought that was an overpay. I guess the problem is the Leafs weren't contending for a cup year in and year out when they made that one. But still, that's what 2 firsts gets you. So.
Yeah, very, very true. When I look at this deal and I try to dissect why Tampa Bay might have seen value in Brandon Hagel, I think of 2 things. Number 1, the team has crazy cap issues. And number 2, they need centerman depth. I know Stamkos is playing center right now, but we've seen him play a lot at the wing, especially in the latter half of players' careers who have been very prone to injury in their past. We often see them move from the center to the wing position like we're seeing with Claude Giroux, right? So maybe this team understands they have 3 or 4 years left to push with this core, and they're trying to get better centerman depth at a cheap cap hit. And when you look around the league, there's not that many very underrated, good shutdown centers at a low cap hit for 3 years. So maybe in that GM office, they realize that, okay, Brandon Hagel is one of the few guys that we can actually get and keep, and let's go out and get him. Now, I wonder if Chicago caught on to that and therefore had a little bit of leverage tried to push up a couple picks, or if they overpaid. You think it's the first one?
I think that the Blackhawks were content to just keep him. They said, unless you wow us, unless you really meet our objectively high asking price, we're just going to keep him. And then I think just Tampa was like, all right, we have one of the best teams in the league. Who cares what happens in 2 years? Like, we're going to have a chance to win.
I agree. Stamkos even came out and said we're not too worried about what's happening in 3 or 4 years because a lot of us aren't going to be here.
Exactly.
The reason I'm going to give Tampa a B- on this trade.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
The reason why I give him a B- is because there were talks that DeBrincat, sorry, I just had a brain fart, that DeBrincat could have been available for a couple first-round picks. If you throw in one more first-round pick, you don't think Chicago would have given up DeBrincat?
I just don't think they have the room for that.
Oh, with the cap hit, even if they retain 50% or got in a third team so they only retain 25.
I don't know. I don't know actually what DeBrincat's contract looks like. I don't know if he's a UFA or not. But yeah, if DeBrincat can be had, I think a lot of teams should be knocking on the door because he's low key one of the best goal scorers in the league.
100%. And if we move on to Chicago, the reason I'm going to give them a B+. I know a lot of people might be thinking, oh, we should give them an A or an A+ because they seem to fleece Tampa on this deal with 2 first-round picks. But Jonathan Toews made a really good comment when he said, if this guy isn't part of the rebuild, then I don't know who is. So, I mean, on one hand, they get a very good return. Neither of these 2 first-round picks are in the garbage 2022 draft. And they get 2 really good young players back in Radish and Kachuk. We've seen them. I think Radish has played 54 games. He's got 12 points, but he was never really given a chance. But on the other hand, man, they give up a really, really underrated player who seems to be like the perfect example for the cornerstone of a rebuild.
Well, those Taves comments kind of pissed me off, honestly. Like, the guy's starting to bother me. You don't run the franchise, and you're not good anymore.
But you don't think what he said is somewhat true? If this team is trying to rebuild, isn't Brendan Hagel the guy to do it?
It's the same thing with Chychrun. Chychrun's 23 too. Brandon Hagel's 23. By the time his deal's up, he's going to probably want to get paid. The Blackhawks are probably still going to be rebuilding. If you like, everyone in the league has a price, and the Tampa just happened to meet it. I think Chicago did well here.
Mm-hmm.
I think an A- a B+ is fair because he does have value. But yeah, would he be part of a rebuild? Sure. But are 2 firsts and 2 prospects also part of a rebuild? Absolutely, they are.
That's true. Maybe this is just too big of a return to pass up on.
That's my thinking. But I think both points are incredibly valid.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to quickly, you hit on it, but regardless of the price, I think he's going to be a great addition. Like, I saw a lot of comparisons going around about how this is essentially like a Blake Coleman 2.0.
Okay.
And they're very similar players. Coleman was a little bit better defensively, or quite a bit better defensively, but Hagel gives more offensively. But Tampa loves beefing up their third line, and they're willing to pay the price to do it. So kudos to them. And we said this about Florida. If they go on to win a cup, who cares?
That's true. I mean, going out and getting Blake Coleman for a first-round pick to beef up their third line seemed to work. They got back-to-back cups.
Yeah.
Maybe that front office has something that they're following that's been working, so keep going with it.
Yeah, I think they know what they're doing. Just before we leave this trade, though, because we're Leafs fans, I don't think we can talk about Brandon Hagel without talking about the potential trade that the Leafs could have made.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just run down what it looked like, and then I want you to tell me if, as a Leafs GM, like, you would have done this.
Okay.
So per Chris Johnston, the Leafs were in on this deal it was Hagel and Flurry for 2 firsts, Matthew Nyes and Peter Mrazek. Would you have done that?
Absolutely not. I'm so happy that Kyle Dubas didn't do that deal. And he came out today and said that he is extremely upset that the GM of Chicago brought those comments public. And I kind of agree. I mean, when negotiations don't work out like that, there's no reason to bring it to the public and have it end up in good faith and in poor faith like it did. I mean, there's 2 reasons why I think that deal would have been terrible for the Leafs. First and foremost, we need anything but centerman depth. Right, we have arguably the best 1-2 center punch in the league with Tavares and Matthews. Mm-hmm. And number 2, this deal is predicated on the fact that Jack Campbell won't get better. And I really believe in Jack Campbell coming back and being a very high caliber goalie coming down the stretch. Like I mentioned last episode, we won't continue this too much. He's going to be given every single game virtually that's on a non-back-to-back, especially with Petr Mrazek going down to the AHL. I think he finds his groove back. And even if he doesn't go back to the Vezina caliber goalie that he was at the beginning of the year, giving up 2 first-round draft picks and the guy that you drafted in the first round last year seems insane. Yeah,
talking about Matthew Nyes, that's a guy that the Leafs were adamant about not moving. He's basically a point a game in the NCAA this year. You have University of Minnesota just won the national championship a couple days ago too. I'm in the same boat as you. I'm really happy they didn't do that because I have faith in Jack too, and just the price objectively was insane. But I didn't think we could pass up the opportunity to talk about how everything relates to the Leafs.
Yeah, very true. But especially in a cap-strapped league, you have a resource constraint when you're making trades at the deadline with draft picks. And you know, the last thing that the Leafs needed, as I said, was centerman depth. If the Leafs are going to go out and let go of 2 first-round picks, like, please go out and get a first-line defenseman who is one of the best defensemen in the league. I'm very happy that they didn't go out and get Brendan Hagel for 2 firsts. Wow,
that's true. That's very true. You could have maybe gotten a Chychrun like we talked about.
More.
Probably for less than that.
Yeah, you could have gotten more for sure.
That's a good point. Okay, let's move over to the Central Division now. I'm going to start with one of the busier teams over the past few days, which is in Colorado, who missed out on Claude Giroux, but they made a pretty big splash on defense getting Josh Manson. They got Josh Manson for a second and Drew Hellison, is it? Drew
Yeah.
Hellison, defenseman prospect. What are you thinking about this?
Okay, so first off, I'm going to give Colorado a B plus on this trade, and the reason is because it's impossible for this team to make an A plus trade because they're absolutely loaded.
Yeah.
On the back end, the only critique I can give to Colorado is that on that defensive end, there's no real like physicality. That team is built on Makar and Taves, who are offensively prolific defensemen. There's no real guy that fits that Giordano model that we were talking about that seems to be a very big physical player, blocks shots, breaks out well, logs minutes, is a purely defensive defenseman. So I see the reason that they went out and got Josh Manson. Like Manson ranks third on his team currently in hits. He'll add a degree of physicality to play on Colorado's blue line. Very big. He's a right shot defenseman who can bolster the second or third pair. And really big too is that the Ducks retained 50%. Is that correct?
I think there was some retention, yeah, because they're so cap strapped there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we look at problems with this deal, I mean, Josh Manson isn't the player that he used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we look at advanced stats, in his expected value in defense is in the 38th percentile, his projected WAR is in the 18th percentile. So he has gotten worse defensively over the year. We've seen his wins above replacement fall pretty largely over the last 2 years. One large benefit to this deal is that the quality of competition he has played with over the entire season is upwards of the 85th percentile. And what that means is that Josh Manson is used to playing against first liners. Yeah. He can definitely be part of a shutdown pair, which is something that Colorado needs because Makar and Taves, while they aren't bad defensemen, are not the prototypical example of a shutdown first defensive pairing line.
Yeah, that's very true. When I saw this trade, like looking back now, I think it was made before Sherrod, if I'm not mistaken. But like, I'm grading this trade relative to the Sherrod trade, and looking at it that way, like relatively speaking, I think Colorado did well.
Yeah, that would be an A++ if you compare it to the Sherrod deal.
Because him and Sherrod are essentially the same player. They just shoot different sides. And right-handed defensemen are usually more sought after, so you have to pay a premium on that. And they paid way less. Like, both get 60% D-zone starts. Both have a 40 to 50% Corsi 4. They both hit. They both play the PK. They both take a lot of penalties. They're essentially the same player. I guess just one happened to play in Montreal and go to the Cup final last year, and so that came with a first and multiple other assets. But from that perspective, I think it's a fair trade.
Very true. I agree. And one small nuanced argument that I think is really important here is that Josh Manson fits the defensive model that Colorado needs at this moment. And let me expand on that a little bit. Josh Manson is roughly average in most defensive categories, except for his ability to play defense on entry defense. And what that means is when other teams are coming down on 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s, that's how you define entry defense. He's in the 98th percentile for virtually all entry defensive categories. That means denying 3-on-2s.
Oh, wow.
Right? Why this is so important for Colorado is Colorado leads the league almost. Like, they're in the top 5 highest turnover rate, especially for their forwards. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense when you got guys like McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, who kind of push the needle very hard offensively and don't really skate back. You'll see a lot of 2-on-1s. You'll see a lot of 3-on-2s, especially with the fact that guys like Makar and guys like Taves are not hesitant to push up on the rush, right? Maybe going out and getting a guy like Josh Manson fills in your biggest weakness, and that is protecting against turnovers in 2-on-1s.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jeez.
Yeah, I like this move. I really hope that was the incentive behind this deal, because if it is, that's I think from the GM's office, that's a really smart move. If we move over to Anaheim on this deal, I'm going to give him a B+. And the reason is because, like you said, right-handed defensemen pay a premium. We know a lot of teams that were in the market for a right-handed defenseman, that being Toronto, that being Boston, Florida. No, not Florida, excuse me. I wonder if they could have gotten a little bit more for a right-handed defenseman. You don't think they could have gotten it first?
I don't know. I think maybe just a lot of trade value, it seems like comes from perception, and for whatever reason guys like Sherrod were perceived to be more valuable or more important. So maybe I wonder if Anaheim held out a little bit and waited for Sherrod to get traded. That could have boosted their market, but maybe they just saw a second. And Drew Hellison's not terrible. He's almost a point a game for Boston College, played in the Olympics too. Maybe they like the prospect more even than the pick.
Yeah, so going off of what you said, I gave them a B plus instead of a B because I think they went out and got a prospect that they really wanted, like you said. And the reason why I think this is because 3 days after they made this John Manson trade, they signed him to a 3-year entry level contract, which didn't take very long. So I think that this is a guy that's been on their radar for a long time, the guy that they think can be part of a rebuild. And as we'll talk pretty soon, Anaheim got like 12 picks.
Anaheim. And we'll get into it later. I think Anaheim are among the winners this year.
Yeah.
But let's save that because that's a deeper conversation for later. I'm gonna stick in the Central. We're gonna talk goaltending.
Okay.
So I want to talk about Flurry to the Wild for a second, and that second can become a first if the Wild make the conference finals. And now, if you've been listening long enough, you know that I like the Wild a lot. I don't know if they're gonna make the conference finals, so I feel like it'll likely still be a second, but the fact that it can become a first is interesting.
Yeah, not even that. It only becomes a first, I think, if Flurry wins 4 or more games within the first 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So this seems like a really big insurance deal for Minnesota. You know, if they fail, it becomes a second-round pick, and if they go to the Western Conference Finals, and if Marc-Andre Fleury plays well, it's a first, and you're willing to give that up.
Yeah, because it's going to be, at that point, it'll be like the 28th to the 32nd, if I can do math correctly. It's basically a second anyway at that point.
100%.
So that's really interesting. But I'm kind of surprised he ended up going to the Wild. Are you?
I think that was the perfect team for him to go to. I mean, it seems like after the All-Star break, Minnesota has been on a spiral, most notably because their goaltending has been atrocious. They thought that Kakkonen was going to be the guy moving forward. They put all their faith in him, and even Talbot was an all-star before the all-star break, obviously. Man, after the all-star break, those two guys have like a combined save percentage within like the 850s or the 860s.
That's really bad.
It seems like Minnesota does not believe in either of those two goalies because they traded Kakkonen to San Jose today for around a 4th-round pick, I believe.
They got Middleton.
Yeah, and Middleton, yeah. They clearly needed a goalie to go on and make a cup run, and let's not disrespect Marc-Andre Fleury. I know he's old. We won the Vezina last year. He has a .908 save percentage and a goals against under 3 on arguably the worst defensive team in the league this year. Man, the dude still has it. I don't think he could have gone to a better team. That team is legitimately a goalie away from going to the Western Conference Finals. And one of the reasons I think Fleury went to that team is because he was very adamant about not getting traded unless it was to a Stanley Cup contending team and to a Stanley Cup contending team that he vibed with. He knows the GM very well from Pittsburgh.
True.
He really loves that GM, and this team is very close to winning. I mean, I think the fact that he was willing to move his no-trade clause there shows that he wants to go there. Obviously, I think it's a great deal.
Yeah. I was looking at Frank, like, to be honest, I was looking at season stats between Talbot and Fleury, and on this season, they're almost identical in a lot of important stats. But if the important flag that you gave, which is that Talbot has been basically a sieve for 3 months, then that's different because their save percentage, their high danger save percentage, goals saved above expected are all they're pretty similar to one another. But if Talbot's been bad, and Guerin said, like I said a couple episodes, this is my year to go for it, then I think that the trade can actually work out.
Yeah, I think most notably Minnesota was very scared about being bad for a very long time because of those recapture penalties they're going to have to pay. I don't think they're taking any chances this year with Cam Talbot in that net.
That's fair.
You know, you said that their high danger save percentages were roughly equal. I'm interested to know the number of shots that Fleury receives on the high danger chances.
Higher.
It must be way higher. I think the guy gets like 40 to 50 shots a game. I have him in fantasy, and he's always losing the game with 50 saves. I just wonder if he's been worn down by that terribly defensive team, and now that he's on a good defensive team, if he'll go back to his Vezina caliber wins.
I wonder. I'm not even that I wonder. I think he will. Like you said, he still has it. I'm interested to see how this pans out. Hopefully the Wild can go on a run now.
I'm excited. I'm going to give Minnesota an A on this deal. And when we talk about Chicago, I'm going to give them a B minus, honestly. I think there was so much hype from Marc-Andre Fleury before that they should have traded him to Colorado when they had that chance. Now they got leveraged so hard because they knew that Marc-Andre Fleury was not signing back there. They knew that obviously he was a UFA. They weren't going to get anything for him, so they had to move him. I just don't understand why when Colorado was struggling for that very, very small part of the season and Kemper was playing really poorly, when Colorado showed interest in him, I really think they could have got like a first-round pick for that guy.
Maybe, but I think Fleury was promised when he went to the Blackhawks that he would be given basically a no trade clause. Like he would have to sign off on a deal. Now I don't know if he did or didn't want to go to Colorado, and I also don't know if Chicago thought they were still good by that point. But they also got him for free. So I mean, to get a second that can become a first for a guy you paid literally nothing for isn't terrible. But maybe they could have gotten more if they had played their cards differently.
Yeah, I think they could have gotten more. A lot of insiders on Twitter mentioned that Flurry was willing to waive his no trade clause to go to Colorado at that time.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah, and they waited to make a move when they were in an incredibly leveraged position just days before a deadline when pretty much every team knew that they wanted to get rid of him. It really blows my mind that Chicago team didn't pounce on that opportunity to move him to Colorado. I'm going to be honest, kind of happy that they didn't because Colorado would have been unstoppable.
Yeah, Kemper's good now anyway.
Yeah, and now Kemper's good, so I don't know. Well, I'm interested to see how this plays out. I really hope Minnesota goes on a run and upsets a lot of people and beats Colorado in the Western Conference.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I mean, you talked about Colorado. You're not sure why they did what they did. I mean, Colorado's not the best run organization. We saw that this year for a number of reasons, but even just like their asset management for a few years hasn't been great. So it's not too surprising that they made a bit of a mistake. But let's stop crapping on the Blackhawks and we'll move over to the Pacific Division. I want to start on arguably the hottest team in the NHL right now, the Calgary Flames. They went out and I guess you can say this is the definition of identifying a need and then paying for it. They got Jarnkrok for a second in 2022, a third in 2023, and then a seventh in 2024. I think both teams win here, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, so once again, I'm going to give Calgary a B+ here because I think, like you said, they identified a need and went for it. I don't know what you're thinking here, but in my eyes, what Calgary lacked moving into the deadline was centerman depth and two-way forwards. I know they have Elias Lindholm, who is a very good two-way defenseman, but centerman. But after that, their centerman depth falls off a cliff with Backlund, Monahan, and Rudzika. Yeah. I mean, when you have guys like Kachuk, Toffoli, and Mangiapane who are very offensively minded, you better be sure you need a centerman playing with them who's good two-way. Yeah. I mean, upon first glance, there's nothing special with Jarnkrok, but when you look a little bit closer, he fills both of those holes. So most notably, he seems to be a defensive type player with an 80% expected value within the defense. His AAV is extremely low. And honestly, I don't think there were any other centers that were two-way like that at the deadline for Calgary to go get. So like you said, identified a need, went for it, didn't have to give up a first-round pick, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it perfectly. He's just a guy. He seems like just a guy. Career high 34 points on nothing special going forward. But he got traded, I think, for a couple of years now to playoff teams. So there's clearly something that teams like. I think it's probably has to do with his ability to play some defense. And he does seem like a guy also who fits Daryl Sutter's style perfectly. And I think Treliving, the GM in Calgary, has done a good job of picking guys out that Sutter probably likes and that know how to play sort of the way that Sutter plays. This is a bit of a minor deal, but I think it's an important deal because I think this sort of puts Calgary over the top. I don't know if they're the 100% favorite in the West because Colorado still exists, but my gosh, they're gonna do damage.
Yeah, I agree. If you didn't think this team was legit before, they certainly are now. Another bonus to this deal is that isn't he cousins with Elias Lindholm?
He is.
Right, so there might already be some chemistry there. They might both get some power play time. Maybe not. Jarnkrok probably won't play on the power play, but either way, locker room chemistry is very important. True. I really like the fact here that Calgary didn't go out and get a huge name for the sake of getting a huge name. They identified a need and paid the price for it, albeit not a very big price. To not have to give up a first round in any rental deal is a good move. I mean, he is a rental, right? He's only on term for one more year.
This year, yeah. I wonder if they find a way to keep him there. If he wants to stay with his cousin, and like if he's comfortable in that situation, I wonder. But yeah, I think a good move. I think Seattle did well to get in addition to all their other trades, they got a second and a third here. They're gonna be loaded with draft capital moving forward. I think, like I said when we started talking about this trade, I think both teams actually won here.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to give Seattle an A here. Jarnkrok only had a year left on the deal, and to get a second, third, and a seventh for a relatively under-the-radar player with really no term left on the deal is pretty impressive. It's tough to ask for more capital than that.